I'm Dwayne Westmoreland, Director of Case Advocacy and Youth Engagement at Kentucky Youth Advocates. First, as a Louisvillian and grandfather, I thank Kosser Charities for leading this community in the challenge to eradicate child abuse by 2023. Every day, Kosser Charities is there when it comes to kids. The key to eliminating child abuse in Louisville takes the commitment and involvement of everyone. That includes preachers, pediatricians, educators, parents, nonprofit professionals, early childhood providers, and many others. That includes you, and it includes me. It is tempting and frankly a lot easier to think that fighting child abuse is someone else's job. And yet, can I suggest that every citizen has a unique role to play in this battle to end child abuse? Many Louisvillians see and interact with children and families on a daily basis. So I am asking you to reach deep, think creatively, and place ending child abuse at the top of your personal commitments. I can't think of a more important role any of us can play to make Louisville a compassionate community.
My name is Dr. Melissa Curry. I'm a child abuse pediatrician, medical director, and chief of the Kosser Charities Division of Pediatric Forensic Medicine at University of Louisville. Child maltreatment occurs in all ethnic, social, and economic groups. It can and does happen in nice families. Photographs are really important, especially for child abuse pediatricians and investigators. So, when possible, help facilitate photographs being taken. DCBS is called the Department of Community-Based Services. That's what we call Child Protective Services, or CPS, here in Kentucky. For the rest of the presentation, I'll be referring to that state organization as CPS. We'll start out by saying a few words about bruises, or contusions. These are the most commonly missed early warning signs of abuse, but they're also the most easily recognizable if we know what to watch for. When it comes to child abuse, it is very, very rare for a child to be seriously injured or killed the very first time that they are abused. This tends to be an escalation of violence over time, and that's why it is so important for all of us who care for children to notice those early warning signs so that we can stop that violence before it escalates. Some of the following pictures may be disturbing to some viewers. The 10-4 bruising rule was developed here in Louisville to help us determine what kinds of bruises are worrisome for child maltreatment and what kinds of bruises are more typical. TEN stands for torso, ears, and neck. So any bruising of the torso, ears, or neck of a child under 4 years of age, or any bruising anywhere in a child under 4 months of age, is very concerning and needs to be reported to Child Protective Services. Here are some additional examples of ear bruising. It's really important to understand that ear bruises are very, very rare from accidental injury. So if we are seeing an ear bruise, that needs to be documented and reported. And as you can see here, the ear bruises can involve multiple different parts of the ear. They can be single or multiple. They can be multiple different sizes. Essentially, any kind of ear bruise is concerning. Here are 2 examples of neck bruises. The neck is a very vulnerable part of a child's body and very rarely injured accidentally. So again, if we see injuries on the neck of a child, particularly bruising, that needs to be reported to Child Protective Services. And then finally, the last part of the rule is about our most vulnerable population, our babies. Any bruising in any baby of any age is highly concerning for inflicted injury. Bruising in babies is not normal. The 2 photographs in this slide indicate fairly benign-looking bruising on 2 different babies, but because that bruising was there and recognized, the babies had the evaluations that they needed, and both were found to have multiple broken bones. So bruising in babies needs to be taken very, very seriously. The rule of thumb is that those who don't cruise rarely bruise, and of course cruising is the developmental stage where children are pulling up on furniture and starting to take steps. In addition to the 10-4 bruising rule, it can also be helpful to understand what normal patterns of bruises are in young children. In general, children tend to get bruises on the fronts of their body over bony prominences. Those tend to be the areas where there's skin right over the top of bone. So the forehead, the elbows, and then the knees and shins by far get the brunt of it. One myth that's commonly perpetuated in the media and in other places is that we can date bruises according to their color. This is really not possible. So if we're in a position of describing bruises that we see on a child, it's important not to attempt to say whether they're old or new. It's better just to describe their color and their location and their shape. This is a common patterned injury. This child was presented for medical care with the history of having run into the wall. However, you see stripe-like bruising on the side of his face. That stripe-like bruising is actually indicative of a slap mark. Slap marks look like stripes because we see bruises in the spaces between the fingers. Inflicted adult bite marks are another common patterned injury in children. Anytime we see bruises that look like parentheses or circles, we need to consider the possibility that it's a bite mark. Now, we also have to remember that the most common perpetrators of bite marks on young children are other young children. So if the child does not have access to a biter or another young child in a daycare setting, we need to at least consider the possibility that we may have an adult perpetrator. Loop marks are another common patterned injury. These are the marks that are left behind when the skin is struck violently with a flexible, thin instrument like a belt, an electrical cord, a phone cord, sometimes a wire coat hanger. And this leaves behind a very distinctive mark, and you can see several examples here. One question that we are often asked is about physical punishment, particularly spanking. Since spanking is legal in all 50 states in America, when do we know when we need to report that to Child Protective Services? And essentially it boils down to whether or not marks are left behind. So while we're allowed to physically punish children, we are not allowed to injure them in the process. So when physical punishment results in injury, that needs to be reported. There are multiple contributors to child maltreatment. Those include domestic violence, criminal history, substance abuse, undiagnosed and untreated mental illness. But the one common thread that we see most often in most of the families in whom we see child maltreatment is the adults having unrealistic expectations for the child's developmental level. So the degree to which all of us in the community can help educate one another and young parents and caregivers about realistic and unrealistic expectations, we can all help with child abuse prevention. There is research that shows that there are certain groups of people we're most likely to overlook when it comes to child maltreatment, especially physical abuse. That includes Caucasian families, those that are considered to be quote-unquote intact, meaning the mother and father are living together in the home with the child, middle-class, well-educated families, and essentially families we perceive to be similar to our own. So it's important for all of us to understand that we have intrinsic biases that can affect our ability to recognize abuse when we see it. When it comes to talking with children, if the children are verbal and able to talk, it's perfectly okay to ask kids what happened to them if you see an injury. It's also important to let them know that you're there for them, that you care, and that if they ever have anything they want to talk to you about in the future, they can do so. Research shows that having a dependable adult express that to a child actually helps contribute to resiliency. When it comes to reporting in the state of Kentucky, any person who has a reasonable suspicion that child maltreatment has occurred is required by law to report to Child Protective Services. That number is on the screen. When we do report, while we're allowed to do so anonymously, it really helps Child Protective Services if we give our name and our occupation so that they can follow up with us and ask questions about the investigation. When we call, we should be prepared to tell them the child's name if we know it, their address, where they can find the child right now, and then the specifics about what we saw and what made us concerned that maltreatment was occurring. If we are very worried about a child and have concerns about the child's life being in danger, we need to say so when we call that into Child Protective Services, and it can also be helpful to give them any information you might have about younger siblings in the home. So take-home messages are to remember the 10-4 bruising rule and that bruising in babies is never normal. Bruises can't be dated. Photographs are very important for child abuse pediatricians to be able to assess injuries in children. It's okay to ask open-ended, non-leading questions of children and to let them know that we care about them and are available if they ever want to talk about anything that concerns them. And we should document our interactions with children clearly if we have concerns about abuse.
I'm Pam Darnell, President and CEO of Family and Children's Place. While not all children who exhibit these behaviors or traits have been sexually abused, there are some common behavioral indicators. Difficulty concentrating or staying on task, agitation and irritability are common. Lacking motivation and showing little or no emotion may also be signs of sexual abuse. Unexplained episodes of anger, rage, or moodiness may occur. A child who has been sexually abused may make strong efforts to avoid or to be with a specific person without an obvious reason. Behaviors such as not wanting to change clothes in front of others or participate in physical activities may be other indicators of abuse. Being consistently dirty, lacking sufficient clothing, or begging for food or money may also be indicative of sexual abuse. Sudden changes in behavior may occur, such as becoming more withdrawn from normal or routine activities, being more aggressive toward family, friends, pets, or toys, or unexpected changes in school performance. The child may start coming to school activities early or staying late or not wanting to go home at all. Some children experiencing sexual abuse assume more of a parental role with younger siblings, often as a protective measure. Play may be absent or may be violent, or the child may engage in persistent play with sexual themes. The child may express feelings of hopelessness, depression, or self-hatred, or may actually harm themselves or attempt suicide. Some children experience nightmares and sleep disturbances and may regress to bedwetting and other behaviors too young for their current developmental level. Infants may display changes in appetite, a total loss of interest in food, unexplained gagging and vomiting, and other symptoms related to emotional stress. Older children may develop substance abuse problems, have eating disorders, or run away from home. Another indicator is when a child displays knowledge or interest in sexual acts that are inappropriate to his or her age, excessive masturbation, or even displaying seductive behavior. Physical indicators may include unexplained injuries, pain when toileting, and trouble walking or sitting. Pain, itching, bleeding or bruising in or around the genitals, or a sexually transmitted disease or pregnancy, especially under the age of 14, are indicators as well. Sometimes a parent's demeanor or behavior sends red flags about child abuse. Warning signs include parents or caregivers who do not provide adequate adult supervision or who are emotionally absent. These parents or caregivers often isolate the child from others, including peers. They may show little concern for the child, seem unable to recognize physical or emotional distress in the child, and may offer conflicting or unconvincing explanations for a child's injuries. If staff or teachers see these adult behaviors, they would want to consider if they have observed any of the other indicators already mentioned. If several indicators, along with these parent or caregiver behaviors, have been observed, the staff would want to consider calling Child Protective Services. If a child discloses abuse, it is critical for you to stay calm, listen carefully, and be a source of safety and support. Manage your own emotions and do not overreact or underreact. Be aware of what your tone of voice, body posture, and expressions may be communicating. The child needs you to be the adult, to be in control, and to provide safety. How you respond will influence what the child chooses to tell other people about the situation. Allow the child to share at his or her own pace, using his or her own language. Do not press the child for details. Do not make remarks that question the child's experience or even confirm the experience. Just let the story unfold. Use your own experience to help you understand what the child may be feeling, such as fear, hopelessness, shame, or guilt. It is okay to ask feeling-oriented questions, that allow the child to share their experience safely without asking specific questions about details. You may make supportive comments such as, "I'm sorry that happened to you. I understand what you are saying. That must have been difficult for you. I can understand how you might have felt afraid or confused or angry. How did you feel? How do you feel now? You sound like you feel angry, sad, confused, or scared. You look angry, sad, or confused." It's okay to feel angry, sad, or confused. Assure the child that their feelings are okay. Most importantly, assure the child this is not their fault. Thank the child for telling you and reassure him or her of your support. Do not promise to keep something just between you and the child. Do not ask for additional details about who, what, when, where, or how. That is the job of the investigators. Do not try to sort out what is true or make discounting statements such as, "Are you sure you did not misunderstand?" or "He or she would not have done that. You are wrong." Or, "That isn't that bad. It could have been worse." Your job is simply to listen to the child. Call in the report immediately.
Anytime we're talking about adolescence, it's important to at least mention the phenomenon of human trafficking. This can affect both girls and boys, and the trafficker, also known as the pimp, is often identified by the adolescent as a romantic partner. So that is one reason that human trafficking is so challenging, is because the victim does not see himself or herself as a victim. And that can be very difficult in helping to identify this sort of exploitation. Truancy is very common in these adolescents, as are physical injuries, and those injuries may be inflicted both by the John or by the pimp. Either way, these children are at high risk of serious physical injuries and many times have been taken to emergency departments and other medical providers for care. The dynamic can be very challenging because it tends to be a complex combination of intimate partner violence and sexual exploitation. If you are concerned about trafficking in an adolescent, report to the CPS hotline. We have legislation in place here in Kentucky to help address it.
Thanks for watching. To learn more, visit faceatabuse.org. Let's work together to end child abuse in this community.